It is Friday, March 13th. Let's talk PlayStation. Let's kick it off with those PlayStation Plus reminders. The March games that are available right now, Sonic Forces and Shadow of the Colossus. Plenty of time to grab these games or add them to your library, and you should definitely try Shadow of the Colossus if you haven't already. I want to start with the Nintendo PlayStation prototype. Remember, I was going to tell you all when this thing sold, how much it sold for. $300,000, actually with auction costs, $360,000 total, which, ironically, is a fantastic deal. Remember, the guy that originally had this thing was trying to sell it for much more than that and refused an offer of $1.2 million from some random buyer in Norway. So actually the buyer of this made off pretty good, which the buyer was Greg Blakemore, who was the founder of Pets.com. Now, most of you have probably already heard this, but it is official. We can finally put the rumors to rest. Horizon Zero Dawn is in fact coming to PC, confirmed this summer by the newly appointed head of Worldwide Studios, Hermen Hulst. This was during a PlayStation blog interview with Hermen Hulst, and he had this to say in response to the worry about Horizon being available on PC. He said, "Sure, I think it's important that we stay open to new ideas of how we introduce more people to PlayStation and show people maybe what they've been missing out on. And to maybe put just a few minds at ease, releasing one first-party AAA title to PC doesn't necessarily mean that every game now will come to PC. In my mind, Horizon Zero Dawn was just a great fit in this particular instance. We don't have plans for day-and-date PC releases, and we remain 100% committed to dedicated hardware." Now, if this isn't one, probably the best answer that most people were looking for, and two, the thing that I've been theorizing throughout this entire build-up, and I've been warning most of you that this is probably going to happen from a source that approached me, and then Jason Schreier came in with his article, and he is very credible that this was probably going to happen. And of course, a lot of PlayStation fans tend to get very irrational about this. The points that we've covered before, it's a matured game on the platform. It sold over 10 million copies on PlayStation 4 over 3 years ago now. It's a very opportunistic thing, right? So it's the Decima engine, Death Stranding's going to PC, Horizon's on the same engine. It just seemed like a very good fit. That is very much what we've been saying, though. This particular game makes sense. It was an opportunity, but also Sony just flat out reiterated that they are still very dedicated to their own hardware, which I suspected anyway, because they aren't doing more outlandish business tactics, like, for example, giving away brand new games on PlayStation Now. That's always the conversation we get into about PS Now versus Game Pass, where they're two very different subjects, right? Microsoft's giving away practically everything on Game Pass. They want subscriber numbers. They're being very aggressive there. Whereas Sony sees the value in their first party. They don't want to hand out these $60 games day and date on PlayStation Now, because these games can move at a $60 price tag and move 5+ million units, upwards of 10 million, for their whole life cycle on the market. So there you go. Sony obviously still cares very much about their hardware. And actually, as a supplemental news story in the same write-up, Hermen Hulst once again reiterated, if you haven't believed them the 60 some odd times that they've said this, but they are still very committed to these big budget, single player, narrative driven experiences. He had this to say: "We're very committed to dedicated hardware, as we were before. We're going to continue to do that, and we're very committed to quality exclusives and to strong narrative-driven single-player games. At the same time, we're going to be very open to experimentation, to new ideas, just trying things out to see what works. I think that's also very much part of the DNA of Worldwide Studios." So, honestly, I think this is probably the best laid out, very forward discussion that Sony's having. I actually thoroughly enjoy this kind of open, candid conversation. It's kind of in the same veins of what we've been seeing with the Wired.com articles, where we're not getting a whole lot of on-screen things, not really a whole lot of events. We haven't seen a state of play for a little bit. But with those articles about next gen, the small CES appearance wasn't much, but we got that. And now this little article explaining, why we're doing something like Horizon on PC. But keep in mind, this will happen in more games, not just this one. It just depends on the title. I still think something like Dreams is a perfect fit. It's very open, very niche, very creative. I think a game like that needs to reach as many people as possible, and PC makes perfect sense. I mean, that's what some people seem to get lost here when it comes to a platform like PC. It's more or less kind of agnostic. That's why Sony and Microsoft, even Nintendo, are exploring PC very heavily. Mobile, for example, Nintendo's really more partial to mobile nowadays, but they're exploring these landscapes because it is more of an agnostic platform. It's not a one-to-one direct comparison, right? It's not like a console versus a console. Sure, there's certain business aspects of releasing on these other platforms where you've got still semi-conflict of interest, like certain storefronts are going to be Steam versus Epic. Epic's throwing a bunch of money at publishers for exclusives, or you're giving Apple 30% cut on iOS on the App Store. But for the most part, these are still agnostic platforms in that there's no direct lead hardware manufacturer that's taking a cut, right? You're just releasing on another platform that's reaching a lot of users, like a lot of people, and you're just generating a lot of software revenue. And you are at some point encouraging more people to say, get a PS Now subscription or a PlayStation Plus subscription, or go and buy a PlayStation 5 when it comes out at the end of 2020. We have to look at it from their perspective, and also it just reaches more people. More people get to play these fantastic games, and that's not really a problem. It keeps PlayStation around, and everybody's happy. Now, in this same interview, it was actually also confirmed that the Uncharted movie will begin filming at the end of this month. So everything we've heard so far is actually correct. It will begin filming. Tom Holland, Mark Wahlberg, Antonio Banderas. It's gonna happen, even amidst all the coronavirus shutdowns and things like that. But now, is it weird to say I'm actually excited now? Because I think it's still gonna be pretty bad, but I'm just happy that I'll get to see what this looks like with that cast. So I'm finally ready. Moving on to our PlayStation 5 news, I think it's worth noting, if I haven't said this already, but there's like new PS5 leaks every single week over on like Reddit and 4chan that we're just ignoring here because most of them are totally fake. It's that snowball effect, right? Where the closer we get to PS5 with no official news, more and more people are just making a roundup post of previous rumors and even confirmed facts, doing them in a bullet point post and passing it off as a genuine leak when it's not, and that's why we ignore them. But I'm trying to pick my battles with these things and, go over the ones that sound the most plausible, the most real. And we have one this week that I thought was interesting, so we'll go over this one. This was on NeoGAF's mega thread for next-gen consoles. The user Odium posted this kind of ridiculous picture of a pigeon delivering a letter to PS4, Vita, and PS5 architect Mark Cerny with a bunch of coos and words in the bottom. Basically, people were trying to decipher this thing as the PS5's spec sheet, whether it's retail hardware or dev kits, but people basically surmised it to translate to 11.6 teraflops, 52 compute units running at 1700 megahertz, 16 gigabytes of memory, running at a bandwidth of 512 gigabytes per second. Now, what then happened is the usual, right? A lot of smaller websites pick this up. They always do this from NeoGAF, 4chan, Reset Era. They'll, take usually whatever they can get and run with the story. So a lot of the guys were like kind of laughing about it there. Even Odium kind of chimed in like, oh, of course people are, posting news stories about this. But then he did another follow-up post basically explaining that, hey, I'm an independent developer. This is secondhand information. I don't have access to the hardware, but this is what I've heard from friends. He then kind of jokes a little bit in the post. But what caught my eye is when he edited the post and added in, it's so funny that some people don't like to hear a teraflop number that's lower than what they expected. Kind of getting a little sarcastic, but basically saying, look, this is what I've heard. Deal with it, right? And that's what I thought, okay, that actually sounded pretty, admittedly, that sounded more genuine than anything else, right? It's true, some people get fired up when they hear something they don't like, but the rest of it just made total sense. Secondhand information, independent developers, so they don't have a big publisher watching over them, but they are a developer, so they have industry friends. They don't have direct access. 11.6 teraflops. It seems like a good number, right? Even if it's not more than Series X, it just seems like a very believable number to where, it's very similar, very close. That's what we even said, like, back when this thing wasn't Series X, when it was Project Scarlet over a year ago. The thing sounds incredibly similar to PlayStation 5. That was the discussion we had back then, and it still holds now. It's what I've been echoing for a little bit, where power is not going to be the biggest difference this time around. What's really important this time around is that SSD that can dynamically change the aspect of certain games, depending on the genre, but also software, as always, features, usual with these HD internet-connected consoles, but also services. That's going to be big this time around because of Game Pass and PlayStation Now. Which one speaks more to you? Both companies still have a pretty different direction when it comes to Game Pass versus PS Now. So power is going to be, I think, not that big of a deal in terms of difference, right? In terms of a power disparity. Even if it's a little bit less, a little bit more, I just don't think it really matters in terms of which platform you really want to buy. It's going to be those other things, those other elements that we talked about. And so 11.6 just sounded believable. And if you are really that concerned as a PlayStation fan about the power aspect, that's not a huge difference. You're going to get incredible looking games for potentially a very good value. I mean, we're looking at a very good price to performance ratio this time around. Assuming it launches around $500 for a PlayStation 5, if you get 11.6 teraflops, if you get that spec sheet, this platform is going to look good. It's going to look real good. So, I'm not saying this is true. I'm just saying it read very believable compared to all the other nonsense that's been floating around that I've been saying, that's not worth talking about. We're not going to touch on that this week. This one, I thought, all right, if that came out, if that's how it happened, that works. Now, moving on to our next news story, Naughty Dog currently working on The Last of Us Part 2. They are still crunching heavily, even with this recent delay. Just yesterday, Jason Schreier from Kotaku posted this amazing expose about the company's working dynamics. He was speaking to current and former employees, and a lot of very interesting details came out of here. So I'll link it down below. You really should read the whole thing. But some of the key takeaways here are actually just kind of this weird situation that Naughty Dog has found themselves in, where they are a top-tier developer. They have this big reputation, but, there's this weird, not necessarily direct expectation. You're never told to stay longer than you have to work on the game, but there's a unwritten expectation that you stay longer than what your shift says so that you can put in all the extra details that you want. We're hearing that producers are not really a thing at Naughty Dog. They don't hire all that many. There's not that many on staff. Basically, you're your own producer. So typically a producer is there for logistics, time management, things like that. But basically everybody's their own producer, and so you kind of have to manage your own time and work with other departments directly. But there's also this situation where a lot of people have previously left after Uncharted 4. They got burnt out, they got tired, they said, I can't do this anymore. One person was hospitalized apparently for working way too much. It got to the point where a lot of people left after shipping Lost Legacy or Uncharted 4, and now going into Last of Us Part 2, which is now their biggest title ever, they can't hire that talented staff anymore. So they're bringing in junior developers, junior programmers, junior designers, and these guys basically are kind of getting thrown into this mosh pit of a top-tier developer that has a higher expectation. And so a lot of time is apparently spent on training the staff to bring them up to speed at, kind of the workflow of Naughty Dog. And again, people aren't necessarily being told to stay 12 hours for the day, but, that's kind of just what most people do. And if you're not doing that, you always look like a lesser employee. And over on Twitter, Jonathan Cooper, who is formerly of Naughty Dog, relayed his experiences, kind of echoing the same statements, but he said he didn't crunch all that much, but he knows other departments did. And he said the reputation with Naughty Dog in Los Angeles is that seasoned developers don't want to work there because they don't want to be a part of that workflow, which is why they had to hire junior staff. And he basically said that with a senior team, they would have been able to ship Last of Us Part 2 a year ago, which is really eye-opening. It's crazy. It's one of those things where you can't immediately go, oh, what a terrible work environment. A lot of it is actually voluntary, where people will stay that extra 3, 4, 5 hours, show up on the weekend. It's a mix of that. It's a mix of the pressure that everybody else is doing, so you should be doing it. It's a mix of job opportunity if you want to get full-time. A lot of these guys are contract employees, so they want to go for full-time. A lot of them want to chase promotions, and quite frankly, you're not going to get a promotion if you're always leaving, on time, and you're like the fourth or fifth person that leaves on time, whereas the other 100 or so people are still in the studio. I mean, that's kind of the unfortunate reality. There needs to be somebody in a higher position that says, look, go home. It's not like this weird sweatshop mentality. It's a creative field that has these weird undertones and pressures of, I need to push myself, I need to be better, this is an exciting opportunity, I'm never going to get another shot at this. Especially for these junior staff that are just showing up there, right? This is probably something where they're like, oh my god, I can't believe I'm working at Naughty Dog. And then they want to do this. They want to throw themselves in this minefield of working at this big developer and shipping this next, fantastic game. But once they stay there enough years, they realize that that's not really the life that they want to live, and then they leave just like the senior staff from before. So it's really disappointing that Naughty Dog still has this workflow, especially when major publishers and developers are actually doing much better. A lot of employees at these other places have come out and said that our practices have gotten a lot better, and that's the direction I want Naughty Dog to go in as well. You can still make a fantastic video game. It just takes a little more time, or senior staff, which you could afford to hire if you better your work environment. Moving on to our next one, E3 2020 is officially canceled, if it wasn't already immediately obvious. As of filming this right now in the U.S., we've got sports, the whole sports season's closing, theme parks closing, schools closing. Any event that's over 500 people is basically shut down. We've got travel that's starting to shut down. Other countries are facing major shutdowns. This is much bigger than E3 at this point. So unsurprising. Though, if we want to talk about the actual repercussions of E3 being canceled, Microsoft and a few publishers have already said that they're going to be exploring online options. E3 themselves, the ESA, are exploring some online options. Some people are already saying, like, oh, E3's dead. It's not going to come back. This was going to happen anyway. That's calmed down a little bit too hyperbolic there. We're going to get E3 2021. It's just hopefully the ESA takes the time to kind of realize what they were planning in 2020, which didn't sound all that good anyway. Try to better E3, spend that time to turn it into an event that will probably stay very relevant, as there is less trade and things like that at the show. But there is still a ripple effect. I mean, keep in mind, E3 is still a major event where tons of people work the show. There's a lot of networking. A lot of independent developers go there. A lot of behind closed doors, private demos, vertical slices being shown off. There is still business done at E3. Not as much, but it's still very important. So this is a bit of a ripple effect that a lot of people will feel this summer, where they don't go to E3 like they did always every single year, and they kind of depended on that opportunity, that networking. You know, it does suck. I feel bad for people that are directly impacted by this, but it is very important that we stop all hanging around each other, because this is an airborne illness. Now, boy oh boy, I can't believe we're talking about this, but it seems like this rumor is actually picking up steam. So Rely on Horror, which is a horror game website, is reporting they have multiple sources claiming that Konami is very much doing a soft reboot of Silent Hill, and that they're starting production or trying to put together the Silent Hill's canceled game from before, or something to that effect, something potentially like it, where they're working closely with Sony and Kojima again. And what we're hearing is that, well, it's almost too perfect to be true, right? We're hearing the original Silent Hill team's involved, original composer for most of the franchise, the Project Siren team, the Siren games from Sony Japan Studio is getting involved. And if you remember the timeline here, like months ago, there was a Reddit post. We didn't even have an official news story about it, but I mentioned it in passing, that there was a Reddit leak about Konami exploring doing Silent Hills again, or Silent Hill. I think most people initially wrote that post off. I don't even know where it is anymore. I think it was deleted. Then, like a few months later, we got a Static Gamer over on Twitter. He had leaked out Resident Evil 3, basically. He had information prior to that, and he talked about how he had heard, not confirmed, that Konami was doing a soft reboot and also potentially an episodic release, kind of like Until Dawn, for example. So it seems like the information is getting a bit muddied right now, because we're hearing like 3 potential games, but it seems like it may be 2 based on this recent report. One being a soft reboot that would be called Silent Hill, just straight up Silent Hill. And then there would be another one that would be a collaborative nature between Kojima again, Konami, and Sony. And the fact that Sony's involved makes this very interesting. Of course, they're a big publisher, and they don't have the IP ownership of Silent Hill, but they do have a vested interest in working with Kojima and potentially securing a second-party exclusive. That is not unheard of at Sony. They actually do that a lot, and they did it a lot throughout the PS4 lifecycle. So we could potentially be looking at some sort of Silent Hill entry, whether it's one main entry for all platforms, this soft reboot, or excuse me, the Silent Hills reincarnation, whatever that ends up looking like. Maybe it would be this cinematic kind of choose your own adventure thing that we heard about before, or maybe it would be more in the veins of what PT was supposed to be, and that'll be exclusive to PlayStation 5. There's nothing incredibly concrete right now, just that there's a lot of discussion going on, and that apparently it's a well-known, not great kept secret in the Japanese games industry right now. Basically over in Japan, it's like well-known information that this project is well underway and that Konami is currently working on securing the finalizing the nature of this second game that we don't know anything about. It's kind of reading as though Sony is trying to mend the relationship between Kojima and Konami, which honestly, I think initially you'd read that and think that's not going to work. Kojima wouldn't want to work with Konami again, but it makes sense to me that Sony would be the one to make this happen, because they are that big publisher that can step in, talk directly with Konami, get over whatever BS that was from the past, right? Get rid of all that baggage, and basically Sony can provide this this levity and security, fund a portion of this game, thus allowing a little bit of breathing room for Kojima so he doesn't have to deal with whatever, you know, politics that Konami wants to bring in, right? I think that's why Sony is in the picture right now, because they will front a lot of the money regarding this project. So that actually, it's believable to me. That makes a lot of sense. It remains to be seen if this will happen, but the fact that we've got upwards of 3 rumors now regarding this, which they're both saying they have different sources, I don't know. This is looking, it's starting to read very good. Still a rumor. Take it with that grain of salt, as we always say. But this one, we're gonna be watching this one closely, because if Sony's involved, you bet your bottom dollar they're gonna want to have exclusivity of some sort, whether it's timed or strictly on PlayStation 5 and PC. That's very much what we're looking at if this is what's really happening. Now anyway, let's get to Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PlayStation Network code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter. If you would like to win a $10 PlayStation Network code, it is very simple. Follow the link down below to the Gleam website. Supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week, because I am trying to pay for your games. Those are all the news stories that I want to talk about you all. Our Tuesday video was some used PS4 games on Amazon. A lot of hits and a lot of misses in that one, so go check out what they sent me. It was pretty interesting, to say the least. This coming Tuesday, I'm not entirely sure, because I'm filming like 4 separate videos at the same time. I don't really know why I'm doing that, but I'm just doing that. So whichever one's first is the one you're going to get. But that is it. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.